folks. Steinorth here. I've been tagged. My dear friend over at Reallybigmonkey1 tagged me with the question, why I love bushcraft. Well, I was thinking that my VR on this would be real short, you know. I'm hoping to keep it short, but you know me, I can get rattling on. So here we go. Why I love bushcraft. Well, first of all, I like to think of the term bushcraft. What is bushcraft? The word bush means out there in the outdoors, in the wild. You can probably hear all the traffic behind me. I'm still stuck here in town for a while, but I definitely wanted to get this video done. But I'm in my son's backyard, and right here by home, this is the closest to being in the bush. You can be out in the bush right in your own backyard. It's that simple. Being in the bush is getting outdoors, being around nature, being around trees and wild things in the area. So that's what I'm doing right now today, is I'm getting out in the bush. Now the second half of that term, bushcraft, is craft. Why do I love bushcraft? Well, it's the craft portion that really makes it different, because I love the bush. I love it outdoors. I don't know, it just draws me. I can't avoid getting in the outdoors. I just have to be there. It's the craft portion that's really interesting, because, and why I love it, is because when you get out in the outdoors, it's so typical that you find yourself in need of things that you forgot to bring with you, or things that you never imagined you would need. So what happens is your imagination kicks in. And when you start using that old gray matter up there a little bit, the next thing you know, the craftiness comes out. And I think that's what bushcraft is all about. When you're outdoors, excuse me, when you're outdoors and you find yourself in need of something that you do not have, well, then you let your imagination go to work. We can all picture things that we need. And if we give ourselves the credit that we have due to each of us, we can think our ways through that, and we can handcraft nearly everything we need. If we didn't have that capability, we wouldn't have any of the things that we have today. It's opening our minds up and saying, well, I have certain tools. I can craft what I need. And that's what bushcrafting is about, is taking the natural items around you and crafting those into very usable and purposeful items. Now, a lot of people say, well, I wish I could do that. I'm not much of a bushcrafter. I couldn't be much of a bushcrafter. I just don't have that imagination. Well, I did a little experiment with a few guys just to see how it would go, and to see, is bushcrafting something that comes natural to most of us? So I took 3 fellas, and all I told them is we're going to do this little experiment on bushcrafting. And each of them had a knife, something like this folder, nice, good, sturdy knife. Gave them each a knife, And I told him, I said, I'm going to give you the afternoon, about 4 hours. All you get to use is the knife. Come up with some item that you constructed out of the natural materials around you. And I told him, there's no rules. It can be anything, anything at all. It can be something practical. It can be something just for the fun of it. But make it out of things that are natural around you. Now, mind you, these three fellas, they're townies. These guys never, to them, outdoors was something that you had to put up with when you got up in the morning and went out to your car to go to work. That's the outdoors between the house and the car. Or outdoors was parking at the local Walmart and walking across the parking lot in bad weather. That was outdoors. So here they are, they're in a natural outdoors environment, and all they have, each of them have a knife, and they're supposed to craft something, create something. And they knew they could create anything they wanted. Well, one fella, not having any experience at all, managed to gather up 3 really nice poles about 4.5 feet long, managed to come up with his own cordage, which the cordage he came up with was, there were a lot of spruce trees, and he saw all the spruce roots that were on the top of the ground. So he pulled a lot of the small, thinner spruce roots and used those for lashing. And he made himself a tripod, and he really didn't know why he was making a tripod, but he just made one. Then he put a couple of cross members on it, and before you know it, he's cutting and breaking apart sticks, and he builds a nice shelf on it. I asked him when he was done, I asked him, what is it? What's it for? He says, you know, it's for a lot of things. He says, you could dry, if you're camping in the winter, you could dry your gloves on it or your socks if it's set up near your fire. He said, I don't know how to make jerky, but he says, I think you could make jerky on this. You could hang meat over it and make jerky. This man's never been in the outdoors, and he came up with that on his own. A very common bushcrafting activity. One of the other fellas, what he did was, he took it real simple. He found himself some logs that were about 3 inches around, about 3.5 feet long, and he had sharpened the ends on them, and he had found a big stone, and he used that stone to pound them in the ground. And he had 4 of them, and he pounded them in the ground, and he simply used them to collect and stack firewood. He says, I know it's really simple and it's kind of dumb, but he said, I thought it'd make a nice, neat rack to hold the firewood by the campfire. Very, very simple, but efficient and proficient bushcrafting activity. He took what was naturally there and he repurposed it and made an excellent firewood rack for in camp. Now the third fella, most interesting. He built a lean-to debris shelter. Not one that us bushcrafters are used to seeing. This bush shelter, or lean-to bushcraft shelter, was only about 2 feet high, and it was only about 3.5, 4 feet long. And it was typical lean-to construction. He used 2 tripods. He put vertical sticks along the back. Then he laid some horizontal branches, and then he covered the whole thing with leaves and debris. And it was a perfect little shelter. If you're a German Shepherd, you know, because it was about the size of a doghouse. And he goes, I know that's kind of stupid and kind of foolish, but he said, I didn't think in 4 hours I had enough time to build an actual big fort, he said. He called it a fort. He said, so I thought I'd make a small one just to see if I actually knew what I was doing. And I looked that over, and I told him, if you were to bring that up to scale, because it was about 25% scale, I said, if you brought that up, made it 4 times larger, you'd have yourself a perfect, absolutely perfect debris shelter. Now, this man had never even pitched a tent. He had never camped before in his life. He said that he's pretty sure that he saw something like that shelter on a movie or something. But he said when he got to thinking about it, with the knife he could whittle and cut everything he needed. And he did the same thing, except he made cordage. He peeled bark off of a dead cedar and used that for lashing. Absolutely perfect bushcrafting project. Maybe it was down in scale, but it followed all the bushcrafting principles. So that in itself told me there's a bushcrafter in everybody out there. They just had to let that bushcrafter come out. And the odd thing is all 3 of them were so thrilled with themselves that they were able to make something out of what they used to think was nothing, that they kept it up. Now they're out there in the outdoors all the time, and they're doing these little projects. They're having a blast, bushcrafting to no end, right? Well, now I'm going to take this a little further. I was in a campground, a very nice, improved National Forest campground. Most of the sites had plug-in electricity, you know, and they had vaulted toilets and all, you know, typical nice campground. A lot of them had RVs. And what I did was I walked through and just kind of introduced myself and got to talking to a lot of the campers in that campground. And it was amazing what I came across. I came across one individual. We were talking and I told him what I do and how I'm in the outdoors almost all the time, and that bushcrafting is something I just love. And we're sitting there at his campsite talking, and he's got this big, beautiful RV. It's about 40 feet long, probably a $200,000 or better motorhome. And he said, I could never do any of that bushcrafting stuff. He says, I'm too much of a city boy. I could never do that stuff. And I got to looking around his campsite, and I said, but you're already doing it. And he goes, what do you mean? And he says, I can't do any of that kind of bushcrafting stuff. I said, what's going on with your awning here on your RV? He says, oh, I'm upset. He says, the arms on it are broken. He says, the RV is only a year old and the arms broke on it. So I disconnected the 2 arms and I rolled the awning out, and I went out in the woods and I found 2 really big 4-inch poles that were about 10 feet long, each of them. And he says, I tied them to the corners of the awning, and I used those big logs to hold the awning up. And he says, I just tied a rope on them and staked them out. And I said, well, you just bushcraft. You just did a bushcraft activity. You went out in the woods, you found the items you needed, and you put them to purpose. And he just couldn't see it. He says, well, okay. And I'm looking around his site a little more, and here they had hauled a couple of nice round dead logs that were about 10, 14 inches, and he had taken a camp hatchet, and he had flattened the tops on them and made 2 nice log benches for around their fire pit. I said, there you go. More bushcrafting. You made 2 really nice log benches, and you said you're not a bushcrafter. It really opened his eyes. He realized, I guess I do have a little bushcrafting in me after all. I came across a couple. They had this big black Labrador. They got to the campsite and then realized they didn't bring the tie out for the dog. Well, they had strict rules in the campground. Your dog can't run loose. Well, they didn't want to keep him on a short leash for 7 days. And they didn't have any cordage. They didn't have any ropes with them, anything for cordage. Now, I couldn't believe it. I took a look and I said, well, how's your dog tied up? And they said, the fellow said, well, I went out on the edge of the woods here. I found an old grapevine. And he said, I found a vine about 25 feet long. And he says, good sturdy vine, still green. He says, I cut it and I cleaned it all up and figured, well, we can make a tie out of this. And he said, and then we went and we cut some more vines, but they were all small, smaller than a pencil in diameter. And he said, my wife does this macrame stuff with, she makes like flower pot holders and things out of this macrame. And he said, so she wove those vines and made a collar for the dog. And he said, between her collar that she made macrameing those vines and the 25-foot long vine he had found, he said, we had our answer. We were able to tie the dog up. And he says, and we've been here 5 days and the dog hasn't broke it yet. And I said, my gosh, man, I said, you realize between you and your wife the level of bushcrafting that you're doing? I said, you went out and you found natural cordage that met the purpose you needed. Your wife took the cordage she found and fashioned it into a very usable dog collar. I said, you people are natural bushcrafters. And they kind of looked at each other and they said, oh, we can't, well, we don't see it that way. I said, the fact of the matter is yes, you are. There's a bushcrafter in you just waiting to come out. And that's what I love about bushcrafting. Bushcrafting is going in the outdoors and looking at all the natural things around you and repurposing those and refashioning them and molding them into a new purpose. And it's exciting. It's exciting. And it's so self-gratifying to be able to do those bushcrafting activities and say, look at what I've accomplished. So why do I love bushcrafting? I think I love bushcrafting because it lets the real me come out. And I can just go hog wild with it and make anything that I will ever need in the outdoors. So that's it. That's why I love bushcrafting. Well, my goofy camera stopped on me, so I don't know how well this is all going to marry together, but I'm going to throw out my tags here, and I'd like these 3 fellas to do a video response to that question, why I love bushcrafting. First one is Bentley's Backwoods Bushcraft. My dear friend over there, he's put up a lot of videos. Love his channel, just love his channel. So here's you've been tagged, Richard. Why do you love bushcrafting? Let us hear, okay? Second one is Bushcraft and Wild Edibles in central Wisconsin. Another dear YouTube friend. Love his videos. Wonderful person. He went through a big move from what I understand. He's relocated. Hopefully he'll find time to do a VR on why I love bushcrafting. I'd really love to hear what you'd have to say. And the third one is The Way of the Woodsman. Now, he doesn't have a lot of videos. I've watched every one of them, and I really like his videos. I really do. And I think he would have a really good VR, so that's why I picked him. The Way of the Woodsman. Now, hopefully they'll all do VRs, and I want you folks to all check them out. Check these guys out. They're really good channels. And anybody else out there that would want to do a VR, go ahead. Go ahead. You don't have to do it by my invitation. Just go ahead and do one. Let us all know why you love bushcrafting. So, with that, this is Stein North. I always love having you folks tag along, and I get to work and do a couple more videos, maybe today yet, drinking my coffee. So, with that, I'll let you all go. This is Stein North saying, you all have a very, very nice day.